The following is brought to you by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. TotalSeal.com. Hello and welcome to another edition of Hidden Horsepower presented by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. And we've had so many great episodes, and I can tell by you listeners, the numbers are going up, and you guys are writing reviews and appreciating what we're doing, sharing them around. So much knowledge and information is being shared on these shows, and it is thanks to Keith Jones and, of course, our co-host for this episode, Mr. Lake Speed Jr., who is back. Lake, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you, Joey. I got too many Joes in this one. I'll be confused. But, yeah, thank you for having me back. Looking forward to it. Me and Mr. Arrington here, probably a better way to count. We have Mr. Arrington and Mr. Costello. We'll use it that way maybe today. Have a history, so this is going to be fun.
Yes, Joey Arrington, legacy name in the world of NASCAR, going to be our guest. And when your name is Lake, I guess you don't have the same problem that a guy like Joe and Joey, like we have on a pretty regular basis, Lake.
I rarely come across anybody else named Lake.
Yes, exactly. So let's bring in our guest. You guys worked together, or certainly worked around, grew up together, spent a lot of time together, got, I'm sure, many, many stories with us, but a very well-known engine builder, legacy NASCAR family, Mr. Joey Arrington, joining us here on Hidden Horsepower. Joey, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, guys. I'm looking forward to it, see what kind of memories and things we may talk about here.
Exactly. And before Lake jumps in, feel free to say, a story about Lake as a young man running around, something that maybe he doesn't want us to know. Those are the ones that we want to know, just so you know.
All right. I'll give that some thought.
Give it some thought. Now, Lake, talk about how this all got started.
Well, it's funny. I was thinking about it this morning. I remember Joey's dad, Buddy Arrington, driving that red and blue Chrysler product back when my dad was first getting into NASCAR. So, we probably did bump around the garage area and stuff around the same time. Of course, I was a little runt kid back then. So, no one paid any attention to me, which could be beneficial at times. I used that being small and stealthy to kind of spy on other people back in the day in the garage area. But, really the first time I met Joey directly was through a couple of gentlemen that Joey knows very well. One is Stacy Compton, who was the driver for us when I was at Melling Racing. And Stacy had won several truck races, doing very well in the truck series. He was coming up to the Cup Series. Of course, Joey built the engines for Stacy's truck team that he drove for. And then the other guy was Ted Flack, who was I'm sure Joey knows his exact title, but he was one of the big wigs at Dodge in terms of the engine program. And that was all when I was at Melling Racing, like I said, when we were one of the first Dodge Cup teams when they returned to NASCAR at the Cup level in 2001.
Very interesting. Now, Joey, what do you remember of young Lake? And clearly, you kind of the era that you came about in, maybe the most exciting and interesting era that we've seen in NASCAR. So start off with Lake Speed Jr. and what you remember of Lake and his dad and something in that line.
Well, I remember his dad when he come in and with his name and his karting background and things like that. But I was really surprised, and maybe my memory is off now, but Lake was talking about Stacy Compton, who was an outstanding driver. Ted Flack, who was head of the engine program for Dodge Motorsports, and but there was another name there. If I hadn't got my wires crossed, by the name of Chad Canals. Is that true, Lake?
Yes, sir. You do. I mean, we omitted Chad from that conversation, but you're right. Chad was our crew chief there at Melling during that time, and he certainly was a catalyst, to have the number 92 truck team. And Yeah, there's another guy that we got mixed up in there too. When after Chad left to go do what he ended up doing with Mr. Hendrick and Mr. Johnson over there, I think we ran that truck with some guy named DW. Is that right?
Yeah. Some people call him Jaws.
So, for those that don't follow the racing circles, Chad Knaus, he's very good. He's a good crew chief, like one of the greatest of all times. Guys, just on that note, what was he like when he was first starting out? We know the highest levels that he has risen to, and really has maybe carried the baton that Ray Evernham set out there as like next level crew chief, thinking about things that others didn't think about. I think Chad took that even further along. Was he that way as a young man? Did you guys notice that kind of intensity right away?
Lake, I never worked with Chad, but for me, Chad as an individual hasn't changed since I met him first in 2000, or maybe earlier than that. So I mean, he's the same Chad today as he was then.
One great thing that I really took from my time with Chad is that focused, serious competitor. That's really that's how I would define Chad. And that's the reason why I think he's been so successful, is that his laser focus on trying to win, trying to make things better. That's what I just remembered. The guy walked in the door, and I'm sure, Joey, you've worked with several crew chiefs over the year, and the crew chief personality is it's a unique personality. I'm not going to need crew chiefs. That it takes something to be that guy to sit on the box and to be willing to make that call. It takes a certain personality to do that. And Chad's definitely of that cloth, but Chad had a drive and a focus to be the best, to win. Not surprising to me at all that they were as successful as they were. Man, did I think they were going to win 7 championships? No, I don't think anyone saw that in the 5 straight. But when him going over to Hendrick and with Jimmy being successful is not surprising, because he definitely, you saw it when we came in. Just off the bat, we got better. And it takes drive and determination. Some people can have their feathers ruffled by that drive and determination, but it's a profession, right? It's not just for fun. People do this for a living, and there's millions of dollars in the line. So your effort and your focus has to rise to that level, and he was never afraid of rising to the occasion in that regard.
Amazing, just the way that different personalities are able to rise to the occasion. Now, Joey, let's talk about you, in that you have been in and around NASCAR as an engine builder for a long time. And on the Mopar side of things, with the trucks and bringing Dodge back to the sport, you were a huge part of that, and have had a couple of different engine shops. And Race Engine Plus is now what you're doing, as far as I understand, and pretty amazing how you've even expanded into streetcar engines. But I want a little discussion about the shop, what you guys do, what you cover, and why the passion for Dodges. Like, where did that come from as a Mopar guy?
Well, as far as the passion, I grew up in the Dodge world, and then when Dodge got out of racing in the late 70s, and my dad hung on as long as he could to 81, 82, somewhere along in there, and then he had to change brands just simply because we run out of parts. At that time, the NASCAR rules allowed you to, I think, run the current body style 3 or 4 years. So, we still had time left. We were just out of parts, engine parts. And at that time, the manufacturers were the only ones that made blocks, and, we made our own cylinder heads then. Dodge didn't make them, but NASCAR had started allowing aluminum heads in the races at that time. And so I just sort of got pinned as a Dodge guy, and it sort of led me down the road I'm at now. And luckily, we were at the right place at the right time. One example of that was myself and Norman Negree and some guy by the name of Ray Evernham. We were standing in line at the SEMA show, and let's see now, this would have been 89, 90, 91, and we all had enough money to get there on an airplane, but it took all three of us to put our money together to get a motel room for a couple of nights. And we all walked out of there. Norman had some kind of forward program going on, and so did Ray at that time. And I were able to reacquaint myself with the Dodge guys, which I hadn't been in touch with for quite some time. And then a year after that, Dodge kicked off their Trans Am program with the Archer brothers, which led right into the truck program in the mid-'90s. And at that time, even Dodge wasn't officially in the truck program, and it was sort of headed up by Walker Evans, who was an off-road Dodge guy, and a couple of others who were sort of race fans of Dodge, and they had their own truck teams, and we kicked it off again and started going from there. And then when when Dodge decided to get involved in NASCAR with the truck series, which would have been 96, I believe, I happened to be at the right place at the right time and have more parts than anybody at that time. And it just sort of grew from there. And then in November of 99, I believe it was 99. Yeah. I got a phone call from a Dodge group, and they said, be sure and stay tuned to your radio tomorrow. We got a big announcement. We can't tell you what it is. And of course they announced the next day that they were going cup racing. So, the ride begins again. So that's really about it. And then now, we've hung on this long, trying to stay involved in the NASCAR stuff, and it's getting tougher every day. Everything is. And we're branching out into the streetcar stuff, and we're going to launch a website in the next couple of weeks. It'll be Arrington Speed Sport, and we'll see where it takes us.
Well, it's going to be awesome. If you look at Joey as well as Doug and Tony, the guys there in the shop, they probably have 100 years of race engine building experience between the three of them.
150.
So you're 100. So you're not going to find a lot of places that the guy that's got a Challenger or Camaro or whatever that wants to tune it up, but wants it to still be reliable and not just tuning it up and then blowing it up. You're going to have a hard time finding some guys that haven't been there, done that, and know the right ways to make power that's durable. Yeah, that's kind of the hidden horsepower aspect of things. They know what yields the biggest return on investment. They know what things are sketchy, can get you in trouble, in how to run an engine efficiently, effectively, but also within the confines of safety to a degree. I mean, if you think about it, in NASCAR, you're talking about 500-mile races. I know the truck series stuff, when they first started having to run multiple races, that's the first place that NASCAR went to with running multiple races was in the truck series. And so when you think about making power, it's one thing to make a lot of power short duration. But when you're talking about having to make power and make reliable, durable power, those three guys over there are as good as anybody you're going to find at having real-world experience doing that. So I think it's going to be a great asset to the performance community to have guys with that level of experience available to take care of the new enthusiast, the guy that's just getting in to this world of octane and power and adrenaline, that we all love. Great place to go to. And plus, you know, the shop they have there is second to none. You know, he mentioned him and Ray and Norman Degree being at the SEMA show. Well, Joey's shop is Ray Everham's old engine shop from when they had the Gillette Everham Motorsports.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's still here. A lot of stuff is still red. There's a lot of Dodge parts here, and, you know, we use them every day. And, you know, we've got 4 dynos, a chassis dyno, and 2 Spintrons, and probably 25 CNC machines. And we're going to apply all of this toward our streetcar efforts.
So let's,
and you know, and I'm going to add, I'm going to just throw this in there just as a quick, because I'm sure not everybody remembers it. I'm not so sure that Lake would even remember it, but I'm not going to say fortunately or unfortunately. It's just the way it's sort of timing. You know, when I was early in my career, certainly the early 20s and stuff, when NASCAR got away from big blocks, you know, it took for the people that were seriously running for championships when NASCAR first started, when NASCAR first implemented the small block, 358 cubic inches. In most cases, especially at speedways, it took two small blocks to finish a 500-mile race. And, you know, some of the race teams got it down to 9, 12, 15 minutes to change motors during a race. I don't know how many people remember that, but, you know, that was part of development then. And now these days, you know, the type of development they were doing then on the racetrack, you do in your dyno sales and test sales like Spintrons and metal. You know, when you go to the racetrack, you're almost 100% when you get there.
Now, amazing the arc of what you've seen, and it gets me excited to hear your opinion on the new engines. And you mentioned the cars that are out on the street, certainly what FCA is putting out, the fact that you can get cars with 800 horsepower from the factory. It's insanity, and you guys will be able to turn the wick up on that even more so with the experience you have. I want to talk about that, but I got to hear about Maurice Petty, in that your experience in the heart of NASCAR started almost as a child. I understand that you were working on engines as like an actual kid. Can you talk a little bit about the connection to the Petty family, just so that everybody that's listening understands, like, that you've been there since jump?
Yeah, it's, you know, I used to ride down to the Petty's with my dad all the time. You know, we'd go down there and get parts, and this goes back to certainly the late 60s and on into early 70s. And then when I got my driver's license, I'd go down there too. And you know, they were like any good competitor, no different than Lake was talking about, Chad, or any of the other greats. You know, they were high strung. You know, you'd walk in some days and they could have had the best Sunday one would ever imagine, you know, but it's behind the scenes stuff that you're not aware of that they have to deal with. And I finally figured out I'd walk in down there and I could see Maurice and just the look on his face, and I'd turn around and just leave. You know, I knew it wasn't worth the conversation. But I also when I went down there and things were going good, you know, his arm went around me, and we went back in the engine room, and he said, "Now listen, son, you need to do this, this, and this. You need to keep your mouth shut, look and learn and listen. And a couple things that happen. Nobody will know how dumb you are if you keep your mouth shut. And if you happen to learn something one day, it'll pay off." So, but they were a great group, all of them. And, you know, I could never repay them, especially Maurice, for certainly things that I have been exposed to in my years in racing.
What about you mentioned the parts, and I can't help but think that the parts that you were dealing with at the beginning were cutting edge, but compared to what you're dealing with now are probably primitive. But I want you to talk about that, right? The things that the factory is rolling out and what they're capable of, and of course we're going to tie that into the piston rings. And we hear all the time with Lake and the fact that Total Seal is able to make things that once upon a time nobody even imagined were possible. Yeah.
Well, you know, the cutting edge really is a term that probably most people don't think about, including myself. But, if you go back to the early 70s, cutting edge for a racing part was basically a lathe or a grinder in your hand, and you took a stock part and trimmed it and filed it and cut it into a race part. And that's the fact. You used streetcar rods, you used street crankshafts. Certainly the cylinder heads come out of streetcars. When they first went to small blocks, I'll never forget there was two cars in 1970 that Chrysler made, and one of them was a TA Challenger, and the other one was a AAR Barracuda. And those things come with what they call the TA engine, which was a special race block that they did not sell over the counter. They put them in the vehicles and they sold them on the dealership floor. And I can remember sitting at stoplights twice in California, and those cars pull up beside of us, and we just roll down the window and say, "Hey man, you want to sell that engine? And we'll give you $500 for it, and give you another engine to go back in it." And at that time, you could buy a regular 340 at a salvage yard, for $50 or $100. And we bought a couple of them like that. But anyway, that's that's sort of how it got started. And now that things move on, and with different softwares and computers, you can do these things at your fingertips and use a lot better material, and everything's sort of CNC'd. Everything starts out as billet anymore, just about. And then when you tie it all into the streetcar stuff with the things that you can do internally with ring seal, certainly Lake is on top of all that, and with boosted engines and which, for an engine builder, for us anyway, they're not like naturally aspirated. You got to treat them a little differently. But at the end of the day, you got 1,000 horsepower, and it's like, how did you get there? And how does it live? And it just does. I mean, today's technology with pistons and rings and certainly all the other things that we do that is sort of a standard issue anymore. It's surprising. And, we do the engines for those Trans Am cars out of Florida, the ones that looks like the 77 Trans Am's Smokey and the Bandit, and those things are like 1,000 horsepower, 1,000 or so foot-pounds of torque, and they drive them every day to the grocery store.
Isn't that crazy to think that there's 1,000 horsepower streetcar that just runs around town? And you were talking about, getting the motors from the guys in California at the stoplight. I remember my dad built, which is back then it was a Busch Grand National car in 82, 83, time frame right around there. I remember going with him to the junkyard in Jackson, Mississippi, and buying a motor out of the junkyard. And then he hauled it up to Aberdeen, Mississippi, to a guy named Bobby Brown. That, I don't know if you remember Bobby or not. He used to do some stuff for Bobby Allison's short track stuff, not the Cup stuff, but the short track stuff. And
I know it.
Yeah, so Bobby took that motor, and like you said, you didn't buy parts for it necessarily. You took it apart and you grind here and you weld there and some epoxy, and next thing you know, we almost won the Daytona Busch race, almost won the Daytona or the Charlotte Busch race that year with the motor that had been in the junkyard 9 months before. And that's just how it was.
It's better now.
They said now you get the stuff from the factory and just 1,000 horsepower from the factory.
Yeah, but it's better now, though, right, Joe? In that what you're working with. Like, I think of all the dimensions of cylinder walls that I'm sure was maybe unreliable at the time, and you didn't really know what you were dealing with. Certainly hoping you got a good one. Like you said, you're trying to buy engines out of people's cars as they're passing by. Nowadays, the manufacturing process is so much more stable. I think that you're pretty confident that you've got good canvas to work with regardless.
Well, the material that they're using now for blocks and cylinder heads and valve seats and valve springs and camshafts is just unbelievable. The things that you, and one example, and I'm just going to use the camshaft. When NASCAR was using flat tappet cams, that's all that was allowed from 2015 and back. And when Dodge first come back in it, the camshaft that we used, the cam profile, the design that we used in 2000, let's say 2006, 2007, was the same profile design that we used back in 1975. But the material of the cam and the lifters and the material and the processes of the valve springs, it allowed you to be more aggressive with the rocker arm. And it was just amazing that you could take a engine that went from, if peak power back in 1973, 74 was probably 550 to 600 horsepower. And now all of a sudden you're at 900 horsepower, but you're using the same cam, but you got enough rocker arm on it that's got another 150 thousandths lift in it and valve springs that'll tolerate it. So it's amazing at what materials and machining processes has done alone.
There's no doubt. Like I said, I'm looking at, staring at my desk right now. I'm looking at a 2008 cup motor, billet camshaft that's tool steel. It's M2 tool steel, and then just next to it's a DLC coated flat tappet lifter. Like I said, it's the same concept part that you had back in the 70s, but using the DLC, doing the tool steel, that material advance, the coating advances have transformed what you could do with parts. And I know that that's something that's applied, that Total Seal is able to apply and help kind of transform what Total Seal could do for the professional racers. Now you don't have to have this big cast iron piston ring that's molly-faced anymore. Now you can do a stainless steel or even a tool steel, very thin piston ring that is PVD coated with, titanium nitride or tungsten, that allows that lower friction, allows that better conformability to the bore that you couldn't get from those older materials because the material just didn't have it in it to do it.
Joe, it's Lake sort of touched on it. When I moved into the shop in 2010, late 2010, and over in one of the corners, it's a room over there about 10 by 10, and I don't know if Lake is, next time he's here, I'll show him. But there's a room over there, and it's got equipment tucked over in the corner. It's probably $50,000 worth of cylinders with lights in the bottom of them, and like for sake of conversation, a thing that you'd sit on top of the ring. It looked like a gasket, and that's how you inspected your rings to see if they were round and true or not, so that it fits the cylinder. And they had to do
light gauge.
every single piston ring like that, especially when the Dodge people got back in it from early 2000 on up to probably 2010 or 11. And anymore, the rings are so good. You just, and plus the machining of the piston, you just don't think about it. I mean, you look at it, but you never have anything that's out of spec anymore.
Wow,
it's amazing.
That is interesting in that in every business, like you get a piece of equipment that's important right now, and then the technology advances beyond it, and then that piece of equipment is not useless, but not needed anymore. And to think that you guys are doing that, visually inspecting piston rings, and now the technology has advanced. What has it been like to watch that happen, though, Joey? In that you know Lake personally, and so you guys are able to relate to one another. You said 2010. Well, it's only 2020, so 10 years. In 10 years, this has advanced rapidly.
Oh, yeah, and everything has. It's probably the best example that everyone touches daily is a cell phone. If you go back to 2010 and look at the phone you had then and what they have out there today, well, the engine technology or just machining technology is the same way. It's just a little bit bigger than. It's a lot bigger than what you can fit in your pocket, but it's amazing that it's things that happen now. It's just at your fingertips. I can't keep up with it. I mean, you said, what do you think about it? Well, in some ways it it takes a lot of the hands-on away anymore. And, that's what a lot of us enjoy, but it's just a way of life. It's no different than picking up a phone 30 years ago or 50 years ago now and having to put your button in a little hole and turn it clockwise and let it tick back until you got 6 digits in the system and somebody was on the other end. So anyways, just things change.
For all you kids out there, he was describing what is called a rotary dial telephone, and you can probably find a video of one on YouTube somewhere.
Well, funny, it makes me think, Joey, this past summer when I was still working at Driven and we wanted to do the oil testing on the GP1 oil, I contacted you because you have the best facility. Just for an off the street guy to be able to walk into a full cup shop, like you said, 4 dyno cells, 2 Spintrons, CNC machines, all the testing equipment that you can imagine, the best of the best, is at your shop. And so I contacted you to do the dyno testing over there, and you were gracious enough to let us come in and have the controls and do the testing that we were doing. That little CT 525, crate motor that you can buy for less than $10,000 made 550 horsepower. You think about it, you just buy it and you just put it in the dyno and it makes 550, where how much work you had to go through with those original small blocks to make 550, 30, 40 years ago. It's just kind of, just that contrast hit me just then to think about. It's just turnkey. You don't think about it. You just go buy a phone today and it's going to have your email and the internet, and you can ask Siri and she'll tell you something. You just don't even think about it. And it's with the horsepower and the reliability of those engines. Cause you think back, when your dad was racing and my dad was first getting in NASCAR, I know my dad, when he was driving for Hoss Arrington and did a little bit for Roger Hamby, those guys, it was nothing to use used parts because they didn't have any budget. So they would run out of Junior Johnson or somebody's scrap pile. And I think one year my dad, he either finished top 10 or blew up every race out of 17 races. I think he had 5 top 10. So guess what? He only finished 5 races out of 15 or whatever it was. They blew up all the time. Anymore, the reliability of the parts were so good that you just forget that stuff blew up all the time back then.
Well, most people may not realize it, but today's cup races, they're running engines 2 and 3 times now. So the engine is in the normal season, which is not this year, but in a normal season, with practice and qualifying, if there were practice and qualifying, the engines would be going 1,700 to 1,900 miles in a weekend.
Right.
I mean, in 3 weekends.
Yeah.
With the valve spring change, and that's it.
Yeah. You think back 2001, that's before they, you still had qualifying motors. Yeah. So you'd show up at the racetrack with a practice motor, swap, put in a qualifying motor, swap after qualifying and put your practice motor back in, then swap for happy hour and put your race motor in. Because, oh my God, you didn't want to put in a mile more than you needed to on the race motor because you were worried it was going to blow up.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild to think about those connections. But again, like I said, it's the material technology, the coating technology, and then the tools, the machinery. I think about profilometer, the ability to measure that surface and characterize it and to a level that you can look at it and see that it looks a certain way, but then the ability to measure it within micro inches so that you can make sure that you have the proper load-bearing surface. That unlocks a whole nother level of performance and durability that you just can't get with a visual inspection and say, oh, it looks good. Well, what it really is and the same thing with the profilometer transfers over to CNC machines, and what you can do machining wise. Like I said, the piston guys, you don't have to think about it anymore. They can machine that ring groove for a 0.5 millimeter ring and be able to give you 0.2 of a thousandth clearance, and you never even worry about it, do you?
No, it's like I said, it's amazing, and what the manufacturers have made our life a lot. I'm not going to say it's easier. You still go through the same steps, but there's no bad parts anymore. It doesn't seem like. I mean, they're not out there.
So let's advance the conversation in that. I'm pretty interested to hear this. We always joke about engine builders, Lake or Keith Jones, the guys at Total Seal, will want to try something. We want to make it smaller, and the engine builder's like, you can't do that. It's too small, and then it ends up working. Joey, your side of that, the development, the pushing it forward, ideas, concepts, maybe you didn't think it was going to work, but it did. Some of the things these guys have maybe come up with that you adopted early that ended up working out, that kind of deal. And on the converse to that as well, just in terms of what's possible, things are possible now that you didn't think were possible before. What's going to be possible? That kind of conversation, I'd like to hear your opinion.
Well, I sort of touched on that a little earlier, but if you go back to the mid '70s when NASCAR had switched to the small blocks and from a technology wise standpoint, materials, it was just straight cast iron and whatever else was out there, and just the machining capabilities. If you had a part that broke, the answer was add more material. That was the answer. You didn't have an option of a different material then. It was just make it more robust. Looking back on it, that probably wasn't the right thing to do, but that was the answer then, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. But and then when you go back and you just sort of pinpoint one area that really has advanced the most, and you've gotten the most out of it, would go back again to the camshafts, with the different materials and the coatings. And then, of course, on Lake side of stuff, if you go back to the old days, you had a piston ring that was a 16th, and the 3/16 that had a molly field top ring, and your second ring was cast, and then the standard oil ring, and the stuff was just big. It wasn't round, it wasn't flat, it wasn't any above. You had, I'm not going to say high leak down, but you had leak down, you had oil consumption, and now these days, Total Seal Ring Company, they got a piston ring that's the width of a pencil line, and an oil ring that's maybe 2 pencil lines, and the stuff is outstanding. I don't know what, you put it in, you crank it up, by the third dyno pull, the thing is sealed up and it's making power, and it's like, well, here we go again. We're going to use these things for 3 or 4 races, and we finally throw them in the trash when we say, oops, we better not use them anymore. You just don't wear them out, and they do a job far and beyond what you're used to. It's just amazing. The capabilities and the thought that goes into building parts like this with the materials that are available today, it just goes on and on and on. It's surprising to me. Next thing you know, you turn around and now they're going to have a piston ring that's a half a pencil line width-wise.
Maybe if we had all those good parts back in the day when you put the nitrous on that engine, it wouldn't have been blown in half.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe.
You got to tell that story.
Yeah.
You got to tell the story about nitrous.
Do tell.
Oh, okay. Well, we were at an event. We were at an event, and it was during practice, and I seen a lot of smoke and haze and a lot of stuff go up, and here come. At that time, the car was solid red, and here he come down pit road, and there was all this stuff dragging underneath the race car. And it's like, what in the world went on? So anyway, finally rolled into the garage area, and we jacked it up and put it on stands, and the back half of the engine with half of the flywheel and some parts of the transmission, when we got the car up in the air to take the engine out, was still laying on the concrete. And we've got pictures of that in my shop here now, and with the half of the engine in the bottom of a 55-gallon trash can. And the engine is hanging up on a lift, or excuse me, half of an engine is hanging on a lift where we took it out. And it was all because of the unknowns. And in this case, it was unknowns, and some youngster thought he knew. So,
so your first experience with nitrous, you literally blew the motor up, not just up, like you blew it apart
in half.
We blew it in half. Yeah. It became an explosive, not a power additive. Power adder, not a power adder. It would just become explosive. But anyway, that was our first try at it, and that was our last. So we figured out there was a safer way to do this.
Yeah, but you said earlier, though, that the boosted engines like something different, and going from the naturally aspirated world of NASCAR engines to messing around with now these boosted engines, and you know how popular it is. Everybody loves it, and it seems like it's everywhere. A lot of these cars are supercharged or turbocharged or otherwise. Has there been a learning curve with those boosted engines as well?
Well, yes, it has been, but technology now is in place, and the equipment to do it with, and it's if you pay attention to what you're doing, you can tune those things in to where they, especially if it's a turbocharged or a supercharger, you can tune them right into a very reliable power adder that's affordable. And unlike nitrous, if you start messing with nitrous, you got to have a little bit of chemistry on your side as far as getting the mixture right of air, fuel, and the power adder. So you just got to be careful there, or you'll have a snapshot to hang on the wall.
But we wouldn't change it, because that's got to be an amazing photograph to have. Lake, final thoughts for Joey as we begin to wind down. Of course, I've got my question that I ask of all guests about experience and advice for the upcoming engine builder that is going to be the next generation. But do you want to tie it all together with any final thoughts?
Well, I think the interesting thing that Joey just said about his, nitrous experience, and then talking about the power adder motors, is the word tune. And I think it's something we kind of throw around loosely. Oh, you just tune it, and this guy's a tuner or this or that. But in reality, a guy like Tony that works for Joey, was a track tuner, and then obviously Joey's got experience doing that. And I think about me and my dad even doing the vintage go-kart racing stuff. It's you're tuning, and I'll let Joey expand on it, but I think that's really kind of the essence. Is that okay? With all the manufacturing capabilities, the advanced materials and coatings, and getting the surface finishes right, and we obviously talked about the advancements in lubrication. When you put all that together and all those things fit together properly and all that, you can still blow the motor up. None of that just means that it's not going to happen. The real final piece, even back when they didn't have all that stuff, was the ability to be that engine whisperer, to listen to what it's telling you, to know what to look for. Like you said, you have the technology now that can tell you a lot of those things that you didn't before, so that you can make sure the engine's happy. Because in my personal experience, and Joey's got way more of that, and I'll kind of serve this up to him and let him carry it from there. If the engine's happy, it's probably going to be very reliable. You can make power, but the engine not be very happy, and you're probably not going to have a good day.
Well, you know that you're exactly right. You sort of got to the worst thing you could do is rush it. You know, if you've got an engine that's a performance engine and you're trying to get the most out of it, there's baby steps to get there. That's the right way to do it. Have all the air and fuel instrumentation that you need to do that, and make sure that you got all the right components underneath the tuning stuff that you do, such as pistons, piston rings, to stand up to it. Because, you know, it's like anything else. When you start adding power, the parts you don't use the same parts for a naturally aspirated engine as you do a boosted engine. So you got to make sure you have all that instrumentation to get it dialed in. And once you're there, you know, you're going about your business from stoplight to stoplight, and you got a very happy engine. And, you know, if you happen to feel good that night and you want to get after it, it stays with you instead of embarrasses you on the side of the road. So.
That's not the AAA call you want to make, right?
Yeah,
you got your 1,000 horsepower Camaro, you know, or Pontiac Firebird done up, and it's on the side of the road. That's not looking too good.
No, and your best buddies will never let you forget it.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. That is exactly correct. No, it's been very interesting. I love the fact that your arc of experience has gone from the days you described of digging engines out of junkyards to now some of the most advanced stuff rolling out of these cars, and they can be improved upon, which is amazing. That the factory rolls them out, and they still have a lot of potential in them. And now you're delving into that world, Joey, and I'm sure you guys are gonna create some amazing things.
Well, I hope everyone that's listening just sort of keeps an eye out for Arrington Speed Sport, and we got some new exciting things coming, I hope, and see what happens.
So I always ask at the end of every episode with a very experienced engine builder, with the idea that there are some younger folks listening to these podcasts that are interested in engine building as a trade, as a profession, that are going down the road and are going to carry this sport and this whole industry into the next decades. Is there a piece of advice that you would like to forward on to them that could maybe make their life a little easier, a piece of experience that you'd like to impart onto them, the next generation of engine builder who might be listening?
Well, I'm going to just as a quick story. When Dodge come back in 2000 and announced they were going to cup racing, I was in a small town in Virginia called Martinsville. I needed some things, but more importantly, I needed a school there, a college program that had a motorsports program. So we put our heads together with PHCC, designed and developed a motorsports program that I feel like for a 2-year college is really second to none. But the short story is stay in school, pay attention to math, and try to go hang out at any kind of race shop, whether it be a car shop, engine shop, or all the above, as much as you can. And if it looks like there's nothing to do, grab the broom, sweep, clean the floors, and watch what's going on around you. You will learn, and the people will respect your efforts. That's how you get in the door. But don't think for 1 minute that you're going to walk in and think racing is cool and become a part of it. It's a passion. For some people, it's a career, and it's a competitive career. So you just pay attention, stay in school, hang out at a race shop, or try to go in and work after school, after hours, whatever they will let you do.
Love it.
That's my advice.
I love it. I think that's good advice. Lake, final thought for Joe before we let him go.
Well, he hit the nail on the head. When he was saying that, I had flashbacks in my head to pushing the broom around the shop at L Speed Inc. as a kid. And, just being around and watching and learning, that is the way to do it. And I was also reminded by something Joey said earlier that Maurice Petty told him that I think also that goes. So just repeat Maurice's wisdom again, Joey, because I think it's fitting to repeat it again now.
Well, keep your mouth shut and no one will know how dumb you are.
It reminds me of what Ron Shaver said, right? Is that being humble, be willing to listen and learn. It's the old thing people say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You should listen twice as much as you talk, and I struggle with that. I do a lot of talking, but you need to pay attention and listen, and humility, I think, is a big step. And I tell you what's neat, though, Joey and I were at an event back earlier this year they did in Kansas City, and weather's, iffy that time of year, and that was kind of right around all this COVID stuff started to hit. So we didn't have a great crowd there, but you still had, you see the passion that people had. Despite all the obstacles, people still show up. And there's young people who are still getting involved in this. So that, to me, is that having that passion is the key. If you've got a passion for this stuff, if it interests you at all, follow the wisdom he just gave you, and good things are probably ahead of you.
Joey, great job. Thank you very much for joining us on Hidden Horsepower, presented by Total Seal. I could tell you guys are buddies from way back, and really appreciate you giving us some insights and thoughts about the old school and the new school. You blew up a block in half with nitrous. All good stories. We really appreciate you taking time out for this episode.
It's been a pleasure. Anytime, sir.
There he goes, Joey Arrington Lake. That was outstanding. First of all, this guy is a young man hanging out with Maurice Petty and comes up through the golden era of NASCAR and then is a big part of the program that brings Dodge back to NASCAR. You may recall how huge that was the time that it all went down, and, of course, now is carrying performance into the next generation of technology with new Chrysler cars, et cetera, and about to launch a new business.
Oh, I know. Some we say over and over again, it's kind of a cliche that, this guy has forgotten more about X than I'll ever know. I mean, that's like literal truth with Joey. I mean, he's seen more stuff through the NASCAR ages and development of engines from the big block era to the small block era than I'll ever know in my life. So he's such a humble guy to really not say all that he knows. But again, what did Maurice tell him? Right. He's a disciple of Maurice. And then, to work with Chad and all those things, he's a great guy. That's the reason why when I had the option to say, okay, I'm going to go dyno a motor, I need some help doing some testing, first guy I called. Because one, it was close by and all the resources are there to do what he needed. So it's great. It was awesome to be able to have him on the show.
I love the fact that he, when setting up his own engine shop, they went to a local school and they got them involved. And his advice to the young people out there, and maybe I'm just fantasizing about these young people listening to the show, thinking about the sport carrying on to the next couple of decades. But I met them at NHRA drag races, and I know that there is a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid out there, guy or girl, who wants to build engines, that wants to know the right way, and hopefully they're listening to this show. The advice that they're getting from our guests, and that included, pay attention to math. Often people will be like, what do I need? No, you got to pay attention to math. If you want to be an engine builder, you want to be a machinist, you got to pay attention to math. Go to an engine shop, pick up a broom, be that kid, be the humble kid, be unlike the stereotype of the modern kid that wants to walk in and become the head engine builder in the first week. Be something different, and you will go far. I thought it was great advice, great episode, and I appreciate it, Lake. Excellent work, and so concludes another edition of Hidden Horsepower by Total Seal. Final thoughts for the audience, Lake, and I know what you're going to say. If they're working on a project, they need to call you guys.
Yes, exactly. I mean, like you said, because of all the material advances and the things we've learned over the ages, that wisdom is sitting in Phoenix, Arizona right now. You can pick up that phone. You can call 623-587-7400 and talk to Kevin or Keith or Bobby. Those guys, they've got that 100 years of experience too. And they've worked with the Joey Arringtons and the Mark Cronquists and the Ed Pinks and the Ben Straters and the Jason Lines. That wisdom is available right now. We can help you understand your project better in order to be able to get the right rings for your application. And not just a set of rings that fit, but it's the right material, the right design in order to optimize the performance of your application. That's what we're really good at. And those guys are sitting there waiting. They're ready to help. So hopefully if you're working on something, you're listening, give us a call. We're here to help and want to help.
There you have it. He's Lake Speed Jr. I'm Joe Costello. Lake, thank you so much once again. Great job.
Thanks, Joe.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Hidden Horsepower presented by Total Seal. You can go to social media, Facebook, Instagram, etc. Follow Total Seal's social, and you'll get new episodes. But, of course, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, write a review, share the show, share it with your friends. I know that they're going to like it, and the numbers have been going up and up and up, and that's great because people realize where can you hear Pat Musey and Jason Line and Ben Strader and Joey Arrington and Keith Dorton tell their stories along the way and give advice to the up-and-coming engine builders. My name's Joe Costello, and you can follow me at WFO Joe. I also produce the WFO Radio podcast. Super excited to knock this one out, another edition in the books, and stay tuned because coming soon there will be more Hidden Horsepower.